Good evening, everyone. I'm David Johnson from Transform Ed Consulting. And as you can see from the slide, these are the services that Transform Ed Consulting offers. And I will give a call out, a shout out to my dear colleague and friend, Cassandra Williams, who is the brains behind Educational Innovation 360 Degrees. You can find both of us on LinkedIn, and we do have websites where you can see all the services that we offer and figure out how to contact us. It's my pleasure to introduce my colleague and friend, Allison. Allison, say your last name so we know that we're saying it correctly.
So last name by marriage, and it is Rakutu Nirina.
Rakutu Nirina.
Pretty good.
Okay, yeah. Pretty good. All right. Well, welcome and thank you for being here. And let me read your bio. Allison Rakutonerina is a leadership coach and founder director of Sikoli Kitana, a Montessori-inspired school in Madagascar. She partners with educational leaders to strengthen executive presence, navigate career transitions, and lead with clarity through conflict. With over a decade of experience, she has supported school directors, administrators, and nonprofit leaders in crafting empowering leadership narratives that fuel personal growth and institutional transformation. Her approach, known as story coaching, combines deep listening with strategic clarity, helping leaders integrate their past, reclaim their intuition, and lead with emotional intelligence. In July 2025, she led Madagascar's first emotional intelligence and leadership training for female public school principals. And please say that for us,
Allison. And Sirabe for Projet Jeune Leader.
Okay. You know, we should point out the languages you speak. What are the languages you speak?
So I speak French fluently, and I'm not too bad at Malagasy, but I'm not quite at the same level of fluency as I am with French, and obviously English.
And tell us about yourself. How did you get to where you are right now, living in Madagascar and running schools and putting together workshops and training?
So I grew up, I've discovered over the years, in a rather unique place, in the sense that I had a father who was an artist, like a professional artist, career-wise, who had many books, encyclopedias, research materials, you might say. And then my mother was working on her doctorate when I was small, and then had founded a program at the University of Colorado that was a graduate teacher teaching improvement program called the Graduate Teacher Program. And her office was in Norland Library. So I grew up around education and art and different ways of thinking. And when I was about 10, I came across a book, which I'm now forgetting the name of, but it was essentially armchair archaeology, but it was about lost civilizations. And it triggered that question at a very young age into human potential and where does it come from and what leads to human success and failure, because lost civilizations obviously are no longer there, right? And so that sort of sparked my interest in anthropology and archaeology and understanding or having experiences that were different. So when I was in university, I picked Madagascar simply because I went to the study abroad office and I asked for the program that was the farthest away and most different from the University of Colorado at Boulder, and they proposed to me this program. And so I came to Madagascar, and that is how I initially met my husband, and many other things sort of transpired. We didn't marry for another 15 years or so, not quite 15, 10 plus years. But essentially that experience and sort of foundational experience led me to reject a lot of academia and education while also still trying to understand what allows humans to succeed. And so I had an indirect journey to where I am today, but always sort of looking at how do we create things, innovate, do things better than we've done them before? How do we rediscover what we've lost or value and benefit from the things we already know? And that has eventually brought me. Yes.
Well, please finish your thought.
I was going to say that eventually brought me to coaching, which brought me to where I am today.
Okay. It might be helpful to us if you gave us a quick review of Montessori, Maria Montessori.
Right. So, and Montessori, which is the school that is the approach to education for the school I founded here in Madagascar, is based on very much a constructive approach to education, in that the idea that children build knowledge based on what they already have. And ideally, you're able to do that through concrete things. And so how do we introduce often abstract concepts like arithmetic or multiplication or division through concrete activities? And so in Madagascar, education, even in some of the better schools and private schools, is generally very, very behind. It's based on a sort of historical French system of education and has not really been updated over the years. And so many people learn through rote memorization. And what you run into is even folks that have been very well educated often don't really understand what or why they do what they do, or how something actually works. And so when I was looking, as I said, I had a very unique educational experience. I found a book on Maria Montessori that my grandmother had left me, or had, and started reading it. And it very much aligned with my knowledge of applied positive psychology and our modern research and understanding of neuroscience, alongside my own views around education, and addressed this problem of constructing knowledge, or that people need to be able to construct knowledge. And Montessori currently in the world is an approach that very much values diversity and inclusivity, and really encourages educators to adapt Montessori's materials and concepts to local communities. And I very much wanted a program that would allow me to center Malagasy history and culture and language, while still having sort of an excellence in education program.
Wow, Allison, this is very impressive. And I know you and I are going to have a very productive conversation for the topic, leadership tools for thriving humans and effective schools. We have 4 bullets. Lead with a coherent inner narrative to align past, present, and future. Integrate emotional intelligence to guide decision-making and communication. Celebrate and own your unique story as a source of clarity and transformation. And reclaim intuition to quiet overthinking, fear, and self-doubt. Where would you like to start?
So I think I'll start with this sort of overarching idea of story and narrative, in that humans tell stories. We make meaning out of things. And so whether, one of the first times this particular concept really jumped out at me was over a decade ago, and I'd come across something from Brené Brown in which she'd said, if you don't write your own story, somebody else will write it for you. And at that point in time, I was working as a career coach, and I was already working as a career coach because I understood that the story we tell is what gets us hired, so to say. And then you can take that into leadership or into anything we're doing, is really our life is built around narrative and the stories that we tell. And so if it's an empowering or a positive or an optimistic narrative, we will be more resilient than if it's on the other side, more negative or critical. And so in that, what I found is that if we are driven by fear and anxiety and those sorts of things, we're going to have that more negative narrative, and we're going to struggle a lot more. That doesn't, we may be very high achievers, but we're not going to enjoy what we do or where we're going. And so if we want to go someplace with confidence and with joy, then we need to figure out how do I approach this from a place of optimism, of understanding, of empathy. How do I embrace my identity and my story? And so story is sort of at the foundation of everything I do, which is why I call the type of coaching I do, which in one hand is executive or transformational coaching, story coaching, because really it's about finding and understanding that story and then crafting it to take you where you want to go.
Story coaching. I read something recently regarding why we find storytelling so effective. And a reason given was that as children, we're accustomed to parents reading stories to us. What's your insight regarding that?
In one sense, yes, that's true. And so it is reading or telling stories is the original form of teaching. And so, as an example of what you gave is, once when I was 3 or 4 years old, we lived in the mountains in Colorado, and there are things like mountain lions and bears out there. And I got mad at my mom and I ran into the forest, and my mom yelled out, "Be careful of the big bad wolf." And I came running back, right? And so, we have things like that to teach children what to be aware of, how to stay safe, right? So absolutely.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting, and I can go another direction with that too. The Grimm brothers, if you're familiar with their work. All right, yeah. Lead with a coherent inner narrative to align past, present, and future. I recall reading it somewhere that there's no such thing as the past because we are living our past right now.
Mm. So philosophically, I suppose we could get into that debate. The reality of it is that many of us, I would say 90% of us,
Mhm.
on an average day, particularly maybe when you get to the age of 40 or so, or let's put it this way, we sort of cycle every 7 to 10 years. We sort of level up in our lives and our careers, and sometimes we have midlife crises or we go through these periods of stress. And at those times, I would propose that what is happening is we're not where we thought we would be, we're not who we thought we would be, and something is out of alignment. And so there's really an important, that coherent part is we really need to understand what part of our past we're satisfied with and what part of our past or our future that has now become our past, which is still us, right? We need to grieve or accept or forgive ourselves or somebody else so we can sort of integrate what has happened into who we are today so that then we're free to choose who we want to be tomorrow. Because a lot of times we're stuck with that grief or that regret or that lack of satisfaction, the telling ourselves that we're a failure or whatever it is. And if we don't resolve that and we don't accept it, it's really hard to choose what we want to be and who we want to be tomorrow.
Inner narrative. What would be an example of an inner narrative?
Just in that example, is I'm a failure is an inner narrative, or I always give up, or I can never finish anything, or I'm not cut out to be a leader. The voices that have been, sitting on our shoulders since we were 8 years old, the parent, the teacher, the neighbor, that created that limiting belief, so to say, in coaching lingo, that then limits us. And or it can be a strong inner narrative. And so that's, the emotional intelligence is becoming aware of who we are and understanding these are my strengths, these are my weaknesses, and owning my weaknesses instead of letting them limit me. These are my weaknesses, but these are my strengths. And that inner narrative is, because I know these are my weaknesses, over here I need to ask for help. Over here, it's okay to work with a coach, for example, because that coach, if I'm somebody who needs to talk out loud, I could see that as a weakness, or I could hire a coach, right?
I'm reminded, and I cannot remember the name of the person who believes this approach or uses this approach, that each of us has regarding the inner narrative. We have a parent, we have the adult, and we have the child. So how does those three ideas fit together with the inner narrative? Who's saying what to whom? Who's saying what?
Yeah. So there are archetypes, and I think there's lots of tools, frameworks, things like archetypes out there, which can be useful to inform where we're coming it from or how we're thinking to sort of understand the why of something.
Mhm.
And at the same time, I think one of the most powerful aspects of learning to be a coach, and the way that the International Coach Federation does, is really the need to not look at why something happened or is, but given what is working, what's not working, what might I do differently, where do I want to go tomorrow, what is important right now. And so, it can be curious, it can be fun. Again, those are all stories in a sense, whose voice it is.
Right.
But what's most important is that I'm aware that the voices are there. I'm aware what's important to me about them, and I choose what I want to listen to, or what is important for me to move forward.
So you're suggesting then that we somehow manage those voices, that are those inner voices, those inner narratives. What would be some suggestions you could give to someone to help him or her manage those voices?
It sounds perhaps too simple, but I mean, from coach to coach, but asking what is important, right? And sort of peeling back the layer of that importance onion is what is important to me right now, what is important to my work. If I'm an educator, when I was working with the public school principals this summer in Encina Bay, they were bringing different problems that they're experiencing, and so we did work on values and core values and things like that, right? And so as an educator, you have your community, you have, in Madagascar, it's a Ministry of Education. In the US, it might be the school district, the superintendent, your local community, right? And then you have your values as an individual. And so being able to say and understand, are my values as an individual out of alignment with somebody's values? What's important here? Do I need to set something personally aside so I can pick up what is important for a student or a parent or a superintendent? What, and how do we triage, so to say, when we have values that are out of alignment? Who do we ask for help? Do we ask for help? Right?
And interestingly, you use the word that I was going to ask about next or comment upon next, align. So really what you're suggesting is ensuring that what we do, what we think are in alignment with our values and past, present, and future.
Right. And when we do something that maybe is out of alignment, we're doing it out of choice and understanding, right? That we're not doing it because we're afraid or we feel forced that it's something we should do. We've actually been able to sort of step back. I really like the idea of blameless discernment, which is something I first heard working with positive intelligence. And, because discerning is important, right? In nonviolent communication, they talk about non-judgment, not judgment, no evaluation, those sorts of things, but really stepping back and discerning what's important here. What is the impact of what's happening? And how do I, as a responsible person, take a course of action or decide what we need to do without blaming anyone?
Yeah.
Which is a huge problem in our culture right now, around the world.
Okay, around the world. That's interesting. That's interesting. Of course, I am in the United States and I know exactly what you mean at this very moment. Okay. All right, let's go to your next bullet. Or would you have something to add to the first bullet? Lead with coherent inner narrative to align past, present, and future.
No, I think they're linked in that sense, that in terms of integrating what we do, that ability to use emotional intelligence in a sense. And actually, I was going to say, I should ask, which is the second bullet you're going to?
Okay, integrate emotional intelligence to guide decision making and communication.
Yeah, are we on the same page?
Yes, we are.
Okay. So in terms of, for me, I already used the word integrate in terms of that inner narrative, right? Is that emotional intelligence here looks like, if I know what is important to me, if I know what my strengths and weaknesses are, then I can also start to use empathy to either forgive myself or give myself some grace for where I have a weakness. And I can also start to understand where you may have a weakness or where you may have a blind spot or something else. And in that, as leaders, we can understand that sometimes we also are making a decision. If I have a bunch of people that are under me, if I'm a superintendent and I have 25 schools, if I'm a school principal and I'm sitting in Madagascar and I have 25 teachers, in whatever our situation is, all of those different individuals or organizations don't know what we're dealing with in terms of the other ones, right? They have that unknown. And so we have to sometimes take decisions, and not be afraid of doing that somebody isn't going to like. And so I see one of the biggest problems sometimes is people that resist or afraid, or they take a lot of guilt, or they have all of this pressure in terms of making decisions, taking decisions, or avoiding going a particular direction because they know somebody's going to disagree or not like it.
Right. Emotional intelligence. Most times when I see emotional intelligence, the term emotional intelligence, it is used to describe a person's knowledge about others and not about the person's personal emotional intelligence. So how should we use that term? Is it I'm intelligent about your emotions or I'm intelligent about my emotions?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked that question because it's something that's really important for me to delineate the difference from. And if we go back to Daniel Goleman's originally work on emotional intelligence is really personal. And so there's And I always forget, despite the fact that I think because we don't use all of them. There's about 23, 24 original markers for emotional intelligence. Maybe it's 25. Somebody watching knows and it's correcting me right now. And then there's about 15, 17, 18 that studies have shown we can actively get better at if we practice them. And in those, the core ones are self-awareness, accurate self-evaluation, which leads to confidence. And those start with me. And that's why so many leadership programs actually have, if you go to an MBA program or anything like that, they often have you read all these books on and do these deep dives into self-awareness and self-questioning and all these things. And that's because to be a leader versus a manager, you have to know yourself. Maria Montessori said that the hardest part of being a Montessori teacher or guide was the spiritual or journey of the adult. And that was really about coming into alignment with oneself spiritually, which very much is speaking to this emotional intelligence aspect, which is very personal. If I don't know myself, I can't know you. If I don't know myself, I can't have empathy for me. And in terms of that, then there's the social emotional learning and intelligence happens outside of that, but you have to have and grow your own and have that own awareness first. You need to work on your own skills, so to say, before you can. And another big aspect or aspect of this, in fact, is also that in terms of communication and different things, a lot of times leaders put the blame on people who haven't listened or followed the instructions. And this is one of the things I think we encounter in coaching a lot is we understand that as leaders, we need to be responsible for our communications. And we need to make sure that we've been as clear and as fair as we can. And then we pass it over to the other side. And somebody does need to pick it up. But it's also on us to make sure that we are communicating in a way that can be understood, that we are being clear about our objectives, that we're not crossing our lines, that we're not presenting people without paradoxes, unless we're highlighting that there is a paradox here, right? Those sorts of things. So,
Allison,
yeah,
you mentioned socio-emotional learning. Right now in the United States, that's being criticized. So how does that fit together with emotional intelligence?
I want to jump on empathy. I never thought empathy would become a political word. And it makes me actually quite sad, given the work that I do, that it has been politicized. And really, for me, empathy is the ability to understand myself. Empathy for myself is understanding myself, just like I said before. What are my strengths, dreams, wishes, visions, values? And if something has gone against those or is going, why am I happy when you're sad? Right? I can understand, okay, here, what is right in me being happy right now when you are sad, right? And then the other side of that is, why does me being happy make you mad when I'm sad? Empathy for you. So what is the 10 to 20% right in your emotion? Can I understand? I don't have to agree with you, but can I understand where you're coming from?
And the first part of that would be understanding oneself.
Yeah.
All right. Anything to add to integrate emotional intelligence to guide decision-making and communication?
Hmm.
You might have another question regarding this.
So the other part of integrate is validation. Humans need validation. And so leaders, if you are in a position of leadership or power, so be you a principal, be you a teacher, because a teacher is in power, in quotation marks, over the students, right? You are the authority figure in a room. Is that we need to be able to validate our own emotions, which is empathy, and validate somebody else's emotions. And so I'm a big fan of the phrase where there's a misbehavior is a need. And so that goes for adults too. If I'm flipping to anger, what is my need? What need is not being met right now? Is it that I have an expectation that's unreasonable? Is it that I didn't get enough sleep last night and so I'm short-circuiting? Is it that I had an argument with my spouse before I came to school? Right? Like the idea that we're all going to show up perfect every day, ready to go, is unfair. And just even validating that. I was coaching a teacher last year, And when that came out of one of our coaching sessions, I didn't tell that to her, but she had that realization in our session. All of a sudden, this huge weight, like I could literally see it leave her body, you could say, on the screen, when she said, wait a minute, I don't have to be perfect, and all these kids don't have to be perfect. This is in an LA school, right? That's where there's lots of challenges right now. And yeah, so that's also that integrating is the part of that is validation and that ability to validate things.
And oddly enough, ironically enough, that was like the next question I was going to ask. How does emotional intelligence affect decision making and communication? Very good. Thank you. That was good.
Yeah.
All right. Our next bullet: celebrate and own your unique story as a source of clarity and transformation. I think you sort of touched that in your discussion about the teacher you were coaching.
I did. But what I'd love to highlight or honor here is I had a couple of years ago, I was on Amazon and I was looking for a book that I couldn't find. And Amazon says to me, based on your past searches, you might like this book. And it was Unearthing Joy by Dr. Goldie Mohammed. And I had never come across her as an educator before. And I thought, well, and I read the sort of description. I was like, that is kind of what I'm looking for. It's not what I was looking for. I don't even remember what I was looking for anymore. And I bought it on the Kindle and I started reading it. And I thought, oh, she's talking about education. And she's put together this framework that like mirrors the framework I've sort of been putting together in terms of identity and story for my students. And I won't get into all of that today because that's another, but there's a framework called job crafting, which I think I've mentioned to you before, that came out of the University of Michigan. And there's different, there's 5 points, she has 5 points, and they're different. But at the end of the day, they both come back to this sort of cognitive aspect of how we see ourselves. And if I am a 5-year-old, I am a 15-year-old, a 55-year-old, if I can't love my own mind, my own body, my own story, if I don't celebrate my own identity, I'm not going to be happy. I'm not going to thrive. And so these things sort of come together. And so that is paramount to then being able to take decisions and communicate well. Because if I'm comfortable in who I am, I'll take the decisions that I believe are the best decisions with the best information I have. And if people don't like those decisions or there's a problem, I'll deal with them. I'll learn from them. I'll be able to say, what could we do differently? What is my new perspective? What is the gift in this? What is my new knowledge? Rather, yeah.
So you know that I'm facilitating at a local university. And one of my responsibilities is to put together reflective questions for people. Mm. And yesterday we spoke about conflict, decision-making, win-win, consensus. So what you described just now, how would that fit into the concept of win-win, consensus, decision-making, and encompassing groups decision-making and respecting others in our emotional intelligence, applying emotional intelligence to others and to the decisions we make, the choices we make? Woo! I thought I lost you altogether.
Oops, sorry. Yeah, there we go. Sorry. I didn't, heard the front part of your question, but not the last part of your question.
Okay.
So
I spoke about working with local students at a local university regarding, I would say, it's decision making, conflict resolution, win-win, consensus building, compromise. Earlier we spoke about emotional intelligence, and emotional intelligence is personal as well as being able to perceive, understand, or to empathize with others. So in your comment about making a decision and not caring whether anyone else approves of your decision, how does that fit together with emotional intelligence?
There's an aspect there of trusting your intuition and knowing when you need consensus, when you need win-win, and when you need to make a difficult or an uncomfortable decision. And so in that sense, no decision is one, or one method is one size fits all, right? It's understanding. I think the places where I see people struggling is when they're asking for advice when they don't need to be, or when they're afraid of the consequences of something, the what ifing, so to say. And it's interesting. I've been reading a brand new book that actually just came out in August called Primal Intelligence, and he talks about a lot of these things as well. And if you don't look straight at the what ifs, if you don't think about what the possible options are, then if you don't confront them, so to say, then you may hold back. And it's almost, I almost it's like when we're acting from fear, so to say, or anxiety, it's kind of like the little kid that's just learning how to drive like a go-kart or something, that looks at the thing they don't want to drive into, so then they drive into it, right? Is that we have to look at the options so that we don't drive into them, because if we're trying not to, we may. And
that's funny. That's funny. Celebrate and own your unique story as a source of clarity and transformation. Let me tie that together with aligning the past, the present, and the future. So, celebrate your own unique story as a source of clarity and transformation. Transformation, of course, means change. So, again, that inner narrative, are we suggesting then that one transform the past, the present, or the past in order to affect the present and the future?
So I think what comes up here as an example is, when they do interviews of people that have perhaps lived not the best life, and somebody says, would you go back and change something? And ultimately people generally come back and say, I wouldn't be who I am today if I hadn't lived the past that I lived, right? Mm-hmm. Is that and actually, there's more to it than that. That's a great example. And in terms of the type of coaching and the work I do, I want to use a different example. Is when we're doing a group coaching, let's say with 6 or 8 different women from different places around in the world or in a region, maybe people with different religious backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds, something like that. And each person tells the first coaching session, we set the agreement that this is confidential, all those sorts of things that go into that. And then I have each person tell their strength story. How did you get to where you are today? What are the strengths that you used? What are some hurdles, problems, encounters you overcame, and who helped you to overcome those? And what you find is that everybody has had different problems. Everybody has a different family background. Everybody has different strengths. But in a group of people, they start to see the overlap. And usually, or I wouldn't say usually, what has happened every single time I've done this is at the end, everybody says, wow, we realize how much more similar we are than we thought. And they all have huge empathy for each other and great pride in celebrating their own unique story and their own unique journey.
Thank you, Allison, because that was my next question. Celebrate and own your unique story. Suppose you do not like your unique story. Suppose your unique story was so traumatizing that it has a detrimental effect on your present and your future. Suppose your unique story is so embarrassing that it's difficult for you to celebrate and even gain clarity from it. Well, how does one manage that? Where does one go from there?
It's work, and it's more than mental gymnastics. There's a distinction between false positivity and finding real optimism. And so actually, a great example of this, my kids and I have been watching a Netflix show called Heartland, which is about these cowboys in Calgary in Canada. And somebody recently lost their spouse, a young woman, in sort of a freak accident. And she asked her grandfather, when am I going to stop waking up with these horrific, haunting memories? And he said, someday you're going to wake up and those memories will be like a warm blanket instead of haunting you. And the same thing happens in terms of what we've started to understand in what we call positive psychology, what some people say is fluffy, but in like real scientific positive psychology, it's that can you get from a place of shame to a place of awe, so to say? this one thing that I used to be ashamed of, can I learn to see that as, wow, I learned so much, or I had to do this, or I had to overcome that. And now, in fact, I'm in awe that I am where I am today, given where I came from, given everything I dealt with. I'm here today. I survived that. And so, you know, it's the tilt in PTSD is post-traumatic growth. And you know, a sign of post-traumatic growth is more experience of awe, a greater connection to meaning and purpose, seeing the beautiful in things. And so there really is something to be said. And you know, and so there's different things. You know, some people need to work with a therapist and do CBT. Some people need to find a friend. Some people need to have a horse and go horseback riding. Some people need to go hiking in the woods and go to a meditation retreat. Some people work with a coach. Some people journal, tell a story, right? But at the end of the day, it's the narrative, the story we tell ourselves. Is it something that, I'm not going to use the word empowering because I know it's not your favorite word. Is it something that allows us to tell our story from a place in which we can see the awe and beauty in life, or something that pulls us down and holds us under?
Thank you, Allison. All right, one more bullet. Reclaim intuition and quiet overthinking, fear, and self-doubt. Whoa, that's a big one. You go first because I have a lot of questions regarding that bullet.
You know, whether I'm working with somebody who's 25 or 55, intuition, you know, the kind of people I end up working with are high achievers. They're people that have put in a lot, they've seen a lot, they care, and they tend to overthink, they deliver, they're responsible, all of those things. And yet something somewhere has put a little crack in things, and they doubt themselves. And so a huge part of all of this, telling the story, emotional intelligence, empathy, validation, is confidence, you could say, looks like being able to take an accurate self-assessment or an accurate assessment of situation and trust myself, trust my instinct. You know, if you think that you need to fire somebody and that thought has crossed your mind a couple of times, you need to fire somebody. I don't know that I've ever come across anybody who, after this thought crosses a few times, goes and fires some person and then says, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Usually it's like, whoa, I should have done that a long time ago. Great relief. And so intuition is just that ability to trust oneself. And it's foundational to doing these other things.
Allison, I got one for you. I heard something recently, and I'm actually in the midst of writing a paper regarding colonialism and colonial mindsets, that intuition was beaten out of us by Western civilization and Western colonization. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I absolutely believe that. And actually, so not to give away the whole book, but this primal intelligence, he talks about intuition, imagination, emotion, and common sense. And it's funny because common sense and intuition are really interlinked. If you're not using your own, trusting your own intuition, you're going to take actions and decisions that other people will be like, that's not logical. That doesn't make sense. And that's the thing, is if you want people to follow you, you want them afraid. And so the other thing is that if you're acting from fear, you cannot trust yourself. You're going to go to somebody else. And that is how people take control. It's how totalitarians come in, is they create an aura of fear and a lack of trust between people and of our own selves. And it's used to control people. So I don't know what you're reading, but I absolutely agree.
All right, Allison, I have more. Quiet overthinking. Well, what's the difference between quiet overthinking and those inner narratives from the adult, the child, and the parent?
So overthinking is, you know, the most simple example is you go to Costco and there's like 900 types of toilet paper, and you have to spend 25 minutes deciding which one is the best. Well, they're all probably going to do, right? At a certain point, limited returns. And so overthinking looks like limited returns.
Okay.
And I need to point, I actually just have a couple minutes because I have another call on the hour.
Mhm.
So you need your conclusion. I know you edit
Okay.
this, but still.
Well, maybe we should go to the conclusion now because I can think of more things that we could discuss. So let's do this. Let's do this. Allison, we talked about a lot of different things. If there's a takeaway you would want people to have, what would that takeaway be?
Ask yourself, who am I and what do I value? And if you can answer that from a place of joy and pride, that's amazing. And if you don't feel bad,
Uh-huh.
but try to understand, where is it coming from? Is it shame? Is it guilt? Is it regret?
Uh-huh.
And do what you can to resolve that. And this is where you can call me, you can call David, you can call Cassandra maybe. But what do you need to get to a place where you can integrate that past story so that you can write a hopeful, and you can articulate with hope, where you're going in the future, with freedom and hope, I should say.
And what's the call to action? What do you want people to do with this knowledge?
Yeah, I would love people to lead from a place of freedom, kindness, joy, to know that we have people that aren't afraid to follow their values, and to create space for other people to love themselves. And so for the kids, the students, all the people we work with, that they all learn to love their own story, to celebrate their journeys, their minds, their uniqueness.
Allison, it's obvious that you have a lot of knowledge about this topic. If people want to know more, how can they contact you?
They can email me, they can LinkedIn me. I also have a website that's lifeworkpurpose.com. And so I work with people virtually and in person. I am in Madagascar, so for US-based people, virtual might be more practical. But I'm happy to have a chat with folks, or share an email, or invite people to go on a coaching journey with me.
Well, Allison, it's been great having you as our guest. And I want to give a shout out to Cassandra Williams. She's the brains behind Educational Innovation 360 Degrees, and she allows us to use her channel. I'm David Johnson at Transform Ed Consulting. If you want to know more, look for us on LinkedIn or look for our websites. Thank you for being with us this evening. Good night.